sneak peek, our second edition. So for those of you wondering what is Sneak Peek, normally 10 at the Top hosts a networking event every year that's in person for young professionals. However, due to this pandemic, we haven't been able to do that this year. And it would have been our 5th anniversary. So instead of doing an in-person event, we decided to bring little smaller snippets of Pique called Sneak Peek. Pique will happen in 2021, April 19th, at the Huguenot Loft Mill in downtown Greenville. So just a quick thank you to all of our sponsors. You can see them on the screen now. Without them, this would not be possible, so we are very grateful for their continued support. Also, thank you to all the committee members for your help in trying to put all this together, and Justine, you as well, for all your help. If everyone can put your name and organization in the chat field, just so we know who you are, who you're with. Let's do that as you can. And then Jason, who is our Pique co-chair, is going to kick us off with a little icebreaker.
And unmute myself. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm looking forward to hearing Jeff Lee present in just a few minutes, but yeah, we just wanted to do something a little fun to kick things off like we like to with all of these sneak peeks. And in the spirit of Halloween, what we kind of came up with was scary office terms or terminology that make your skin crawl. And I'll throw a disclaimer out there at the beginning of this that if you use any of these terms or catchphrases, we don't judge. You're not alone. We've probably used them too. We hear them every day now on video and in the office. But wanted to give kind of an example to kick this off, and then we wanted to open it up for some feedback and some terms from you guys that you hear on a daily basis. But we're talking about things like low-hanging fruit, it's on my radar, or let's get the ducks in a row. One of the newest ones that makes my skin crawl that I've recently heard is re-swizzle. It started gaining popularity a few months ago at ScanSource, and it kind of, I think, came out of having to shift plans. So instead of using like, let's shift our focus, or let's shift the plan, or let's rework the plan, swizzle and re-swizzle have become a term. Actually, I just heard it twice today during a Microsoft Teams meeting. So wanted to open it up. What are some of the least favorite terms you guys hear in the office regularly that just, again, in the spirit of Halloween, make your skin crawl?
I'll ping you.
Yes. I'm expecting a golf club to the head when the people say that. Ping you.
Yes, I'll ping you.
Not right.
Or I'll run that up the flagpole.
Yeah.
And my last one is, I hate when people talk about synergy. Let's create some synergy.
Synergy.
Yeah, that's.
And they always do that.
It's always, yeah, synergy. You can't say that without the hands. It's like you're doing some kind of like spell.
Energy. I was sending Jason an email today, and I actually typed out, we can flush out something, before the meeting today. And I thought, flushing it out, that's gross, really. I mean, that's like toilets and
Flushing it out.
flushing your toilet or your hot water heater or some medical devices. That's kind of gross. Why do we say flushed it? Let's flush out that idea.
We actually say flesh out is where it came from, F-L-E-S-H, which was to add meat to the bones. You wanted to flesh it out.
Fleshing it out. Now we're flushing it out.
Yeah.
That's even worse.
Yes.
Yeah. Flesh.
No one says this but me, but since we're sharing funny office terms, here's one feel free to use somewhere in your future carefully. When I just spent 16 years before I came to AFL at Michelin, or a division of Michelin, And we had a term called transfire. That's when you found someone that you really wanted to get rid of, and instead of firing them, you transferred them to another department. So they became somebody else's problem.
You transpired them.
They were transfired. Yeah, probably not a good thing, but
That's good though.
Yeah.
That sounds like something you'd hear in like a like Office Space,
yes.
or one of those comedies or something.
Oh yeah.
Horrible bosses.
I love those, but it's one of those phrases
unprecedented times is starting to get on my nerves now.
Unprecedented.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Can we get some precedented times back?
Yeah.
It was fine the first maybe month or two, but now
Agreed.
yeah.
Mhm.
As we move back to normal,
yeah,
The new normal.
The new normal.
or the new normal,
Yeah,
depends on who you're working for. Yeah.
the new normal. That's very annoying.
Laser focus. Yeah.
Laser focused. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one. And then one that's not completely annoying, but I think hard to define. Take ownership over your projects, but
Yeah, but no authority, but have ownership. It's like,
Yeah.
exactly. That's why it's so weird.
We delegate responsibility without the authority. That's it's pretty common.
That's what it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's code for we need someone to blame when this goes wrong. So you're going to own it.
Yeah.
I'm looking at some here. Drill down. Oh, deep dive. That's one. Oh man, I hear that like almost daily. It's usually during a meeting, and it's usually about setting up another meeting to take a deep dive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's always good.
Let me get that on my calendar.
Yeah.
Instead of put it on the calendar, let me get you on my calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take this offline.
Oh no.
Let's squeeze. We'll squeeze you in.
The offline thing kills me. We'll take that
Yeah.
Offline.
Yeah.
When did we start adding ality to everything? I made a little note. Verticality. It's not vertical. It's verticality.
Verticality.
When
Yes.
we ran out of words in our dictionary.
Well, that's where Reese
Vocabulary.
Wizzle came from.
1,000 years ago, before most of you guys were working, I worked at Floor for a guy named Larry. Oh man, I can't remember his last name now. Anyway, VP over there 1,000 years ago. He liked to roll out this word, difficulty, which of course is not a real word, but he had this Cheshire cat grin, and they'd be in some room discussing some conflict and giving him some big hassle, and he'd be like, well, that seems to be a difficulty we will be unable to resolve at this moment. And everybody goes, what did he say? It's a difficulty.
I hate
Anyhow,
that per my original email.
yes,
Per
my original email. Yeah, it's
Unnecessarily formal.
What was that?
It sounds so unnecessarily formal.
Oh, yeah.
But I think we've all done it though once or more than once.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And again,
Most,
that's
not
what
all,
I
but
said.
many.
That's what the disclaimer is. We've all probably used these.
Well, later I'll ping you all offline and we'll see.
Yeah. Any others anyone wants to share? Any other golden terms? All right. Well, with that, we'll leave you plenty of time, Jeff.
I don't know how much of it I'll take, but we'll see. I'm usually pretty good about the time, but we'll see.
All right. So moving forward, there's another scary one.
There's one right there.
Today, I have the pleasure to introduce to you guys Jeff Lee. He is the Performance and Development Manager at AFL, and he's been here for, what, close to 2 years, Jeff?
It will be 2 years in January.
That's right. And Jeff has done an incredible job of providing training solutions and development opportunities for all the employees at AFL. We're super excited to have him here today. And he's going to be talking about some scary office situations that really don't have to be so scary. So Jeff, I'll hand it off to you.
That's the theory. So, guys, in case you're curious, and I don't know if anybody will want it, but at the end, I'll upload the notes for this in case you want to take a look at them. So don't go crazy trying to write any of this down. And it's not, you might be surprised in a couple of places, but we'll see. So back to my script. As Jessica said, I am Jeff Lee. I'm AFL's Performance and Development Manager. In case you're curious, I've been a behavioral training guy for about 30 years. I started in '89 as an instructional design and technical writing guy. At Fluor sort of grew into a broader learning and development job as time went on. Worked in a number of industries, beginning in commercial construction with Fluor, then IT with a company called ARG-BIS, was a European retail corporation in Atlanta. Then at Aris, a broadband equipment company, and then was back at TCI, which was a distribution subsidiary of Michelin. Was there about 15 years. And since January of 19, as we just said, I've been here at AFL, where we make cabling and equipment for fiber optic telecommunications and electric power transmission. Just for the sake of, I'll throw it out there, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect at some point. No problem with that. So I guess the punchline is I have a lot of experience with scary conversations. I run annual reviews for multiple companies. I laid off hundreds of employees during an economic downturn earlier this century, personally laid them off. I've helped resolve conflicts between groups, between individuals, between my own teammates. I've also caused conflict between groups, between individuals, and between my own teammates. Nobody's perfect. Scary conversations, whether the typical weekly conflict or that dreaded annual review, they don't really have to be scary, though. And that's what we're going to take a look at. And somebody, if you're not seeing my slides, holler at me and I'll fix it, but I think we're good. We start with conflict. It happens all the time. Work, hobbies, grocery shopping, presidential debates, dishwashing, project schedules, seems like it's everywhere now. Specifically, my interest is in the workplace. But we have a small thing to deal with first before we jump into actual conflict conversations. Usually when I do the full class for this, I start with a question. And the question is this: can how you feel be wrong? You think about it a moment. Can how you feel be wrong? My belief is this: you can be wrong on the facts, you can be wrong in your actions, you can be wrong in your opinions, but you can't be wrong in your emotions. Right and wrong doesn't really enter into it. How you feel, like your hair color, your height, your shoe size, it can't be wrong. And it depends on your very own and interesting biology. Your feelings are yours. Your parents gave them to you. They belong to you. They're your property. Here's the problem with that. They have nothing to do with other people and their actions. They have everything to do with you. So I start my conflict discussions with this: no one has ever made you angry. The anger is yours, your property. You own it, not them. How does it really work? We'll take a very quick look. Something happens. You hit your finger with a hammer, something. Your body has an involuntary reaction. Glands mostly centered in and around your digestive system flood your bloodstream with neurotransmitters. You have no control over this. No one does. When those neurotransmitters reach the brain, they're picked up by the limbic system. Your heart rate, your blood pressure, adrenaline, noradrenaline, all these things go up, and learned behavior kicks in. And all of those reactions you learned as a child come back to haunt you. You scream or cry or hide or attack or run or slam things or call the other person names or clam up or whatever, but it's all learned behavior. The physical reaction is beyond your control. The behavior is in your control. You got to do something about it. Now let's talk about conflict at work. First off, recognize conflict is natural. It happens all the time. We have different backgrounds, abilities, methods, and probably more important, we have different styles, motivations, and points of view. These differences often lead to conflict at work. We're going to look at 3 fairly common strategies or reactions to workplace conflict: retreat, resist, and resolve. So we'll start with retreat. Some of us retreat by instinct when faced with conflict. Our natural tendencies might be to avoid confrontation or to back off at the slightest sign of trouble or to try to change the subject. We might even naturally place other people's wants and needs ahead of our own. And some of you are probably thinking this is a bad reaction, but not necessarily. If it is controlled and chosen for a specific reason, it might be the right thing to do in context. Say there's a big power difference between you and the other party, like an executive who might be infamous for their temper, or retreating to regroup might be smart. Or if it's a person whose temper is out of control, think of retreating as a short-term investment to get better prepared, right? But retreat, don't just say yes to their demands. Delay. Your goal here is to delay. Oh, and here's another reason to retreat. You're wrong. It happens. It happens to me. You can be wrong a lot of the time. You retreat. So why flip it on its head? Why not retreat? Well, you're teaching the other party the wrong lesson. If you teach them to bully you every time they want something, the long-term costs are pretty high, and it's hard to recover from them. Resist. Resist can be a viable choice, but it can also be an escalator for the conflict. If your default is to resist, your natural tendencies may include being assertive or challenging people in situations. You might even naturally argue your position, pushing it out of confidence or possibly pushing it out of defensiveness. But you may also have a habit of putting your wants and needs ahead of others, sort of the opposite of the person who retreats naturally. But why choose resist? Well, sometimes a passionate defense of right is what's called for. Some big expression showing the costs in a dramatic way, right? It also makes for a good delay tactic if that's what you want. Resisting without using personal attacks or aggressiveness, simply refusing to give an inch and continuing to restate your position, can occasionally get the other person to walk away and delay the actual decision. I have used this quite a few times myself. So why not resist? What's the downside? Well, too much resistance and a solution may never be reached. Resistance runs a high risk of failure in the long run, and your personal long-term costs grow higher when people decide you are unreasonable. It's one of the reasons that if you want to use resistance as a strategy, you stay away from personal attacks. You stay away from aggressiveness against the individual. You simply refuse to give an inch on your position. Resolve. Then there's a resolve, working it out. Individuals who have a natural tendency to resolve usually have controlled reactions to most situations. They make decisions out of conscious thought rather than reaction. They listen, they understand other perspectives, and are interested in exploring alternatives. They are more than willing to negotiate. Rather than only seeing their side, they focus on everyone's kind of wants, needs, the best interests of everyone. But I don't want to overstate this. Why choose resolution? Well, if you have the time, this gets you the most livable solution to the issue. You get more buy-in to the choice, right? Because we resolved it. But why not resolve? Well, it may not be possible. Others may be unwilling. You may not be able to reach resolution in the time frame you're facing. You might need a delay. Generally, this is the best choice. Resolve, we sit down and talk it out. But a few ideas around this. To have a resolution conversation, you need some ground rules. Here's a few just to get you started. These are not all encompassing by any stretch, but we respect everyone's feelings and ideas. We focus on facts. We're prepared to call a break if needed. We take responsibility for our own actions. Everyone involved takes responsibility for their own actions. We admit mistakes. This is really hard for people to get their head around. We say it, but it's hard for people to get their heart involved. You have to be willing, if you're willing to resolve an issue, resolve a conflict, you have to be willing to admit mistakes. You also have to commit to not interrupting and not blaming people. You avoid you statements because they sound like blame, especially but you statements. And the goal here, you're trying to build on other people's ideas because you want them buying in. And something that I preach about a lot, actually, Justine and I were talking about this before you guys came in. Don't make assumptions. And maybe most important, restate the other person's point of view free of sarcasm until your understanding is real and acknowledged. Free of sarcasm can be fairly important in a conflict. The ground rules, a few other ideas around these conflict conversations. Getting some basics sort of straight about how perspectives work can help you prepare to have a more effective resolution conversation. People's perspectives are different because they are built out of position, experience, skills, background, all that stuff. I found this little visual demonstration online. You guys have probably seen it. I didn't create it. But looking from the end, it's a circle, and that's true. Looking from the side, it's a square, and that's also true. But the actual truth is that it's a cylinder with two light sources. You get it? It's kind of a visual explanation of the point. It's easy enough to make true statements and have a conflict escalate, with the individuals getting further and further apart, because the truth eludes them both. True and truth are not the same thing, and the true portion of individual perspectives kind of leads to bad assumptions, which causes or escalates the conflict. True versus truth. And here's a little teaser. I was teasing Justine with this earlier. I'm not going to explain this. One more statement, or rather a challenge around the idea of truth. If you take my challenge, you'll come to a better understanding of the year 2020. That's not an exaggeration. I'm not going to explain it. I'm simply going to challenge you. Google Simpson's paradox, and this is not Simpsons the cartoon. This is Simpson, the English mathematician and logistician from the 1950s. Google Simpson's paradox to learn a little bit about truth and fact and context. That's just a little challenge for you. Let's keep going talking about conflict conversations. Helping someone prepare to resolve a conflict, even if that person is you, is mostly about asking the right questions. Now imagine you're going to coach someone to go in and resolve a conflict, or you or yourself sitting down to prepare to go in and have a resolution conversation. You should ask questions that encourage self-reflection to show the negative impact of the conflict. And of course, questions that challenge assumptions and uncover points of view. You're trying to get the person to seek solutions. And I hate to use this word because we just talked about laughing about it, by supporting ownership, right? Discovery and discussion, but supporting ownership. What kind of questions am I talking about? Well, you're asking yourself or you're asking the person you're coaching things like, why do you think he's frustrated with this situation? Talking about the other person. What were their expectations? How did your decision impact the others? What are their requirements and why? What are their delivery and schedule guidelines? If your changes affect their group, how does that affect the unit or the customers? What did you say or do that might have contributed to this escalation? Why? Those kinds of questions, the kinds of questions that force people to logically think about the other side of the coin, that other perspective. Just a couple of more things here around conflict. So the good, the bad, and the ugly for team members and leaders. The good for leaders is learn to recognize signs and intervene before, but be open to all sides, but intervene before it gets crazy. Be open to all sides. Leaders help others see the conflict's impact, the benefits of resolution, and how it might be resolved. Good leaders always challenge assumptions. They prohibit demeaning behavior. They acknowledge frustration, difficulty, but they don't remove responsibility. Hate to bring back that ownership thing again. Good team members accept how they contributed to the conflict and seek to understand the other point of view. They look for kind of positive outcomes. They challenge their own assumptions. Bad and ugly leaders ignore conflict signs. They avoid getting to the root cause. They take sides. That's the worst thing. I tend to react angrily the side taking thing by a manager. They intervene to shield their favorite employee. They discourage ownership. They're driven by feelings rather than logic. Bad and ugly leaders. Bad and ugly team members focus on problems rather than solutions. They want to discuss the problem, discuss the issue forever. They don't want to discuss solutions, and they tend to blame others. They might even deny there is a problem and avoid acknowledging their own role in it. They make excuses for why solutions won't work and make assumptions about others, often demeaning others. They might even secretly instigate the conflict. I've known people who take pleasure in this. Sometimes they passively accept the situation and continue to complain. That's pretty ugly to me. The good, the bad, and the ugly. The most powerful tip, though, that I saved here for this part, most powerful tip I can give you for conflict requires a rare quality on your part, actual sincerity. You can't fake it. It has to be real. But this tip or trick or whatever you want to call it, it actually works if you're sincere. Here's the tip. Facing someone who is angry at work. You don't know how to calm them down. Here's how. Empathize. Express empathy with their emotion. You're not agreeing, and you don't make statements about their opinion or the facts. You simply empathize with their emotions. Then immediately ask a question about the issue that requires thought on their part, a real question. What do I mean? Something like, man, I know it's frustrating. You're counting on a delivery that doesn't happen. Help me understand your schedule requirements. Or something like, putting the blame on you has to feel like a personal attack, whatever the reason. Take me through the whole design process and what went wrong. In answering your question, though, they will again raise their voice. The volume often expresses the emotion involuntarily. Hear them out. And then do it again. Empathy that's real, followed by a question that's real. Most people will be calm enough to work on a solution after 3 sincere efforts at empathy coupled with a question. It's not a perfect tool, but it works more often than not. If you get to 5 sincere attempts, meaning you mean them attempts, they're still angry, you probably should move on to something else. Their temper spiraled out of control. But I'm telling you, if you don't get anything else out of the 30 minutes you got with me, this works. It works like magic. It's one of my hobbies as a mentalist, but empathize and ask a question. Real empathy followed by a real question works. And some final tips on conflict as I check my clock to see where I'm at, and I'm right on time. Just a little wrap on conflict before we move on to reviews. Retreat when it makes sense, but be aware of the costs and choose wisely. Resist when you need a delay, but once again, be aware of the cost and choose wisely. Resolve whenever you can. You get livable solutions when you can control your reactions, challenge your assumptions, gain an understanding of others' perspectives. Even people who are wrong can gain from other people's perspectives, and you can gain from theirs. So that's kind of the final tips on conflict. The other type of conversation we wanted to discuss, or I wanted to talk to you about, were annual reviews. Feedback fear is my phrase for it. This should be the easiest thing you do all year, annual reviews. Nobody believes that, and I've been preaching it for 30 years, but this should be the easiest thing you do. The problem with annual reviews is that annual thing, annual. It makes them backwards looking and somewhat punitive in function. The secret to improving this and taking the fear out of it, well, frequent feedback discussions. Ask for them, offer them, often. Weekly would be great, monthly would be a minimum. If we're talking about performance and behavior all year long, there is no unknown in the review, so the fear goes away. You know before you walk in the room exactly what's going to be on that form, whether you are the manager or the employee. Frequent feedback takes the anxiety out of reviews. Of course, the feedback discussions themselves may contain a little fear, but we can fix that, and that's what I'm going to talk about here shortly. But if you're doing feedback and doing it frequently enough, the employee who acts shocked in the review is lying to you, right? They're faking it to try to use it as a defensive measure. But let's talk about these feedback conversations. To take the fear out of feedback, discussion should focus on behavior and actions, not personality or person. In other words, not you're lazy. Instead, you were late for meetings on August the 6th, 8th, and 15th. Not you're incompetent. Instead, you missed the last 3 deadlines without warning and with no contingency prepared. I teach managers to manage behavior. I'm a behaviorist by training, but ask specifically about your behavior. If you want feedback, ask about your behavior and actions to get it. A pattern is coming in a few minutes, but we start here. Behavior and actions, not personality or person. Behavior and actions. Pick the right moment. That does matter. Don't ask for it in front of a group, and don't offer it in front of a group. You guys know this. It's okay to offer praise in front of others, but under some circumstances, constructive and positive feedback, both at a detail level that matters, should be done in private. Even positive feedback. It's sort of a generic level, public is fine, but if you get down to the real detail where it actually matters, that probably should be done in private. And the timing matters. Some advice for managers and leaders that might be out here in my little group. Time matters. Annual reviews discuss whether you reached your goals or not and why. Feedback is about getting there, getting the goals accomplished. Ask for it and give it. Time matters. We reward good behavior now. We identify bad behavior now. People need a chance to improve. You need a chance to improve. Keep in mind, feedback accomplishes goals and reviews announce results. Make the reviews easier by getting the feedback continuously. Annual reviews are not about improvement, and to believe that they are is to be misled. So you need a pattern for that feedback. Here's the one I've used for years. Whether you're asking for feedback or giving it, either way, you need to follow a pattern that works. The star works for me. Positive feedback, you want to give or ask for a star. What's the situation or task that was faced? What were the actions taken? What were the results of that action? Positive results, positive feedback. Reinforcing the actions. Turn the star into questions to get the feedback you need out of someone else. But if you're offering it, follow the pattern. Use the star. Feedback for improvement uses almost the same pattern. What's the situation or task that was faced? What were your actions, the actions taken? What were the results of that action? But you need to have to add an alternative. You have to add the alternative. What would have been a better action? What would have been the results from this alternative action? The alternative action and the alternative result are key. Without them, this is just criticism, and criticism is useless. We have spouses for that. We don't need coworkers for it. Real feedback for improvement gives you something to do differently, right? That's the alternative, something to do differently. Just a few more tips around feedback beyond the star pattern, though. Things that matter to me anyway. Specificity and sincerity. The more specific the feedback is, the more valuable it is. And much like the empathy I brought up earlier, if you don't mean it, you should probably shut up. You can't fake sincerity. You have to care about the other person and their performance for real. Otherwise, they see the fakery on your face and hear it in your voice. If you think they don't, well, denial ain't just a river in Egypt, as the Dire Straits once sang, right? Denial ain't just a river in Egypt. They see it and hear it every time. And don't forget, feedback for improvement requires an alternative. Give it or ask for it. Why brings in an interesting issue to feedback or annual reviews discussions, either one? Why brings the issue of condescension, talking down to others? If why someone did something a particular way matters to the discussion, you should ask them why they did it. As soon as you assume you know why they did what they did, you are assuming superiority and treating them with condescension. Ask them. Have a discussion about why. If you are requesting feedback on your performance from someone else, offer up your motives and the rationale behind your behavior. Don't defend it. Offer it up. Get the other person's perspective. You need it to improve. But if you want to know why they did what they did, you ask. Don't assume, and for God's sakes, don't tell them. A few little tips to wrap this up. No fear, all ears. When seeking feedback from others, that's where you need to be. You offer them the star, you ask for the alternative. Don't defend your actions. Giving them the why can sometimes lead you to defend your behavior, but that's a bad idea and will result in limiting the feedback you get. Don't defend. Try listening instead. Be conscious of your body language. If they're giving you a way to improve, try not to send an evil signal back to them. You want the feedback. Be sure to listen for specifics. Summarize the specifics back to them for confirmation. Reflect their opinion back to them to confirm your understanding. Summarize and reflect. Receiving or asking for feedback. And show a little gratitude, for goodness sakes. If someone takes the time out of their day to help you by giving you feedback, thank them, even if it's feedback for improvement, or maybe especially if it's feedback for improvement. They may be saving your career. You should thank them. And one last tip for both of these topics, the scary conversations, and this is sort of a tough tip. It's not one that everyone will like, but here it is. Feel later, learn now. Set your emotions aside, get control of them. They're your property. They have nothing to do with the other person. Get control of them. Hear what the other person is saying. Even if they are wrong, you can still learn something. Even if they're wrong, you can still learn something. Something about dealing with them, something about dealing with others, something about how you're perceived by others, something about control and behavior. Feel later, learn now. And that's what I have for you today. I really hope you got something out of it. Thank you all for your time and patience. Maybe I'll be back for another session at some time in the future, maybe when we have more time. For those of you interested, I am going to try to jump over to the chat. Let me stop sharing so if somebody else has something they want to share. But I will try to jump over to the chat and put my notes out there for those of you interested in seeing them. Da, 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 da. 20 on. As soon as I learn to click on the right button at the right time, they are uploading as we speak and will be out there for you guys to download if you want. It essentially is the slides and the script that I use to talk to you guys.
Thank you, Jeff, for all of this. It's some really, really good information, very helpful, especially as a manager. I try to value feedback and make sure that I give my employees that feedback because I value it myself. I think there's some really good advice in there. We have a few minutes for questions, comments. If anyone has any, feel free to either type them in the chat or just ask them directly.
Absolutely. I'll make up an answer to virtually anything you would want to ask.
I got one.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Jeff. That was great. Do you have any insight as to when the annual review was created? Because I can't tell you how many current and past colleagues I've had that you're catching up with them. I've had some that have left and gone to other companies and they think they're doing great and they're, oh, I love it, and then all of a sudden you catch up with them a couple months later and they're like, man, I just got absolutely obliterated in my annual review. I thought I was doing great and
Yes.
I'm not even close. Now I'm gonna quit because I don't think they like me.
Their
I can't
managers
tell you how
suck.
many times I've heard that.
Their managers suck. It's not a complicated thing. I deal with this all the time. If the managers at Michelin, and I don't know if Michelin still does this, but we generally try to institute a rule where a manager meets with every employee individually, one-on-one, minimum once a month. And in that meeting, you're talking about goals and giving them feedback on their performance. If you are a manager or leader and you aren't doing that, at least meeting and talking to your people and telling them the truth. Here's the other thing that I run into quite often. Ran into it fairly recently. Some managers, they meet with their employees, but they don't have they are reluctant to tell people the truth. And you need to. If a guy is screwing up, He needs to know that now. If he needs a chance to do better, telling him at the annual review at the end of the fiscal year, okay, yes, he failed. Well, so did you. I want your review to be just like his. If he needs improvement, I want you to get needs improvement if you're his manager, because you let it go all year and you didn't tell him anything. You suck. I mean, I tell it to managers all the time. It's just how it is. The annual reviews themselves. Now, Jessica, you don't repeat this because I don't want to work myself out of a job. Of course, I'm sitting here in HR and they're all listening to me. Because I run reviews for AFL worldwide. And we have some reviews that run annually at the fiscal year, like mine and Jessica run on the fiscal year. We have others that run on anniversary dates. Ideally, I'd like for them all to go away. Not that I want to be unemployed, but here's the thing about annual reviews. Unless you're using them to genuinely set compensation, which almost no company does anymore. If you're meeting with your employees weekly and talking to them and telling them how they're doing and you're measuring goals and doing all that, the annual review becomes beside the point. You can still do them, but there's no pressure on it because all the pressure is we're managing the business as we go. We use goals here at AFL, which I am a big fan of writing annual goals, but I'm also a big fan of every month going in and changing them if stuff has changed, right? You can go in and alter and change things and make an update. If you set a goal, say you run the calendar year, if you set goals in January and you discuss them with your manager in December, you both suck. You're terrible at your jobs. You are. Because why did you even bother to write goals? The whole point of writing goals is these goals contribute to what the company's trying to do. We started this year. I made everybody, and I don't expect a whole lot of impact this year. It's the first year at AFL we've done this because first year I'm here, but I made everyone in the company, when they wrote goals this year, you had to attach your goal to one of the company's initiatives, one of the company's imperatives. You literally had to choose one of the, I forget the number, how many they are, but you had to pick one to assign your goal to it. This is the first year of doing that. We'll keep doing it. But those goals are supposed to be about how you're going to work for the year, not just some piece of paper that we wave in your face 12 months from now so we can give you 2.5% raise instead of 3% raise. It's foolishness, right? The goals are supposed to be meaningful. If they're worth the effort, they are, and that means they're worth talking about. Guys, I'll get carried away and I'll do this till 6 o'clock because I have interest in these topics. But
well, we have a question in the chat that we can address really quick.
What's that? I didn't see it.
As someone who is more at the beginning of my career, do you have additional advice about providing feedback to those in more senior positions?
Be very careful. If they are in a more senior position, as in they don't report to you, they are like giving feedback to your VP, right? Here's my rule of thumb, and I have done this quite a number of times, even as a young guy. You make it in the form of questions. You want to give feedback to a VP, then say, hey, here's what happened, and here's what my understanding of what you did. I don't know if this is what you did or not, but it's my understanding of what you did. But can you tell me why you did it that way? Tell me because I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to understand. You do it in the form of questions. You don't go in at the beginning of your career to a guy that's, an old fart like me that's been doing it forever and go, well, the situation you were faced with and the action that you don't do that. There's no upside to that for you in your career. But if you ask the questions carefully, you can absolutely ask the questions, because essentially it's a trick. You're using your ignorance to provide feedback to them on their ignorance. Does that make sense? You ask them about why they did what they did, or have them explain it to you, but you play it not as you're challenging them. You're playing it as, hey, I'm trying to learn something and understand. That holds the mirror up to them. That's what I would do. So I don't know if that's a valid answer or not, but it's the one I got.
Sounds good to me.
What I've done anyway. I will give you this though, around that idea. If you do it enough, and if they're a reasonable person. Now, I don't want to make anybody mad, but the fact of the matter is something around 10 or 15% of human beings on earth are just evil and you can't fix them. They are what they are. The bell curve is real, ladies and gentlemen. Read the books. The bell curve is real. And every company is going to hire that guy that you just got to survive them and they go. But if the senior person you want to give feedback to is a reasonable human being, a smart person, start by asking questions and ask smart questions, things that you want to know and things that give them feedback. Something magical will happen. For example, at TCI Tire Center is a division of Michelin that I worked at. And we went through a great big turmoil in the last few years, but I was there 15 years. All three of the CEOs that I worked for there, when they had town halls and big meetings and talked to people, they would come to my cubicle or my office back then and ask me what I thought, how I thought it went. Now, why did they do that? Because for years, every time they had one of these big town halls and meetings and whatever, I would, the next time I was in a room with them, I would ask them. So talk to me about why you did it the way you did it. Tell me what, help me figure out what you were trying to go. I coached them into asking me for my help is what I did. It sounds stupid, but quite frankly, it's no more complicated than that. It plays off of a certain piece of psychology. And here's one last thing, and I'll shut up. Y'all got to make me shut up. If you want someone's help at work, someone who doesn't work for you, you don't have any authority over, even to be a VP, whatever they are. Here's a little psychological trick that almost all Americans fall for. And an American is anyone who's been here longer than 6 months. So culturally, we people adapt this little psychological thing fairly quickly. Don't ask for their help. Ask for their advice. They can't help but give it to you every time. And if I have you thinking about my problem, I have you working on my problem. So the power of questions, to use them to coach people, to get people involved in fixing something you want fixed, it can't be overstated. Quit trying to make your case and ask questions and let them make your case. I'll shut up now unless somebody else has got another question. Thanks, guys.
Are there any other questions? We got a few more minutes.
I thought I had one, but I think that you answered them with your asking of the questions.
You got to, yeah, if you don't give me I'm like air. I'll fill any container you put me in. So if you.
Mine was going to be about the circular conversation, the when you say something, the other person says something, and you say something, and
that's why you stop saying things and start asking things.
Asking questions. I like it.
Restating your position over and over is a problem. I will give you this also as well. I'll recommend a book for you. It sort of is about conflict, but it's much more about negotiations. If you want to understand the real psychology of negotiations and how to deal with what's going on in their mind and not the stated case, Never Split the Difference is the book you're looking for. Written by a man who was the FBI's #1 international hostage negotiator for a number of years. Never Split the Difference. Some very powerful little tips in that book about, quite frankly, manipulating people's minds and behavior. It's a good book.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
I think it might be on my list already, but I'll put it to the top now.
It's really good. All right.
All right. Anything else? Or we'll let you guys go early and let Jason close us out.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, thanks so much, Jeff. Again, that was fantastic. I sometimes regret. I sometimes think to myself, man, I should have been a psych major or something. It's just fascinating. So, but thanks again, and thank you all for joining us today. Our next sneak peek will be on Thursday, November 12th, from 4 to 5 p.m. and we're going to be focusing on virtual volunteerism. So we're going to be talking about the importance of staying plugged in with local boards, your community, and local nonprofits even during a pandemic. And that's going to be led by Alex Moore, Senior Director of Marketing and Communications at the United Way of the Piedmont, and Mary Pat Smith, Director of Resource Development at the United Way of Anderson County. So thank you all again for joining us, and have a great evening. We'll see you on November 12th.
Thanks
Thanks,
again, Jeff.
everyone.
Thank you. See you.
Bye, everybody.